All right. It's 9:30. 9:32. I'm bordering on punctuality today. Turning over a new leaf. It's funny that you mentioned that. So, I'm tired today. You might hear it in my voice a little bit. So yesterday, Elena and I went skiing for the second time in 5 years. My legs are tired. Plus, it was sunny, and beautiful, and you get that outdoor sun, wind tiredness. And then last night was our neighbor's Persian New Year's party. So did you know about this? Did you know about Nowruz? So our friends, I should say, Asal is from Iran. Her husband Matt is from Prineville. Sorry, I don't know why I laugh at that. They're wonderful people, but and it's expanded beyond Iran now. So the Persian peoples follow the solar Hijri calendar. Have you heard of that before? No, I hadn't either. So I'm saying this like I know things, but in reality, I learned a lot of things as well too. What's fascinating about this is it's one of the only observational calendars still in use. So our calendar is a rules-based calendar. So like a second is this long, a minute is 60 seconds, it's so on and so forth, and there's 365 days in the year, except for the 1 year, which has less to make up for the fact that our calendar doesn't exactly align with the rotation of the Earth around the astrological terms. Well, the solar Hijri calendar is observationally based, meaning that their year always starts on the spring equinox. So it literally is 1 year is one circuit around the sun. Yeah. So Persian New Year was technically on Thursday, the 19th this year, which was the spring equinox. But they had their party last night. But it was a ton of fun. But I was up until like 11:30 dancing, and so I'm like, I'm 42, man. I'm feeling it this morning. Oh yeah, well, so it was fun, but it was really interesting. Elena and I were West Coast swing dancing to Persian electronic music. we had a great time. But I got to meet a lot of really, really neat people. There was like a whole group of Iranian expats there. So I'm on a watch list now, just to let you know. But it was a ton of fun. So I'm happy to be here this morning. But yes, coffee is needed, and yeah, and it's a new year. I get a second chance at New Year's, right? Another resolution. I'm just piling them on. So to recap, we're going double speed, sort of, for a little bit. Because I just realized, too, I was thinking about it this week, I basically just have 3 classes left before Palm Sunday. And we'll take Palm Sunday and Easter off, and maybe 1 Sunday off after Easter. And then I'm going to do something for the end of April, beginning of May. And then I think it's either May 11th or 18th or something like that. May 11th is when we're going to start the class on the creeds. And this isn't going to be a super long one. On the 11th, I am going to do a little bit of background on the 3 creeds that we use, the Apostles, Nicene, and Athanasian. Talk about their origins and their structure, right? The 3 different articles, et cetera, et cetera. And then on May 18th, Linda Smith, who is our spiritual care director, is going to lead us in a work of writing our own creeds. So really thinking about the language that we use. How do you understand the different aspects of these statements of faith? How might you reflect them in your own context or your own words? Yeah. So those 2 are going to be set, and then we'll probably have a little bit of intervening time again where I'll do something else. And then a reminder, Scott Stouffer and I are going to do a civics course this summer, which Yes. No, there's no test. It's mainly going to be Scott, I hope. But it's well, yeah. I've already told him that several times. We're gonna co-teach it, meaning that I'm gonna stand here and look pretty while he tells you stuff. But it's gonna be a little bit about our country as a whole and how it's put together. But there's gonna be a special focus on our local government, specifically the city of Milwaukee, because Scott is the city recorder for the city of Milwaukee. He is a self-professed politics and civics nerd, and he's going to kind of give us an insight into how our city runs and what that looks like. So I don't know how long that's going to last. This is as far out as I can plan, but I'm really looking forward to that. Maybe we can stretch it over the summer depending on the different things that we talk about. But anyways, that's that. So I'm trying to speed run through the middle section of Revelation a little bit. Which, to be fair, so I'll remind you, I am using Craig Kester's book, Revelation and the End of All Things, as my source material for this. Well, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And to be fair, Kester kind of speed runs through this section of Revelation a little bit. And the reason is because it's really focused on, we'll come to that in a bit. It's really focused on, can't do it that way. What was it? It's really focused on these big sweeping images. So last week we talked about the beasts, right? And we get numbers thrown out, like 7 heads, 10 horns, the number of the beast is 666. And we talked about what is the significance, if any. And this is, things that we should think about throughout this entire book. But, again, 7 is it's a wholeness, right? The 7 days of the week. This is completeness, wholeness. 10 is a nice round number if we're using base 10 math. But we were talking about this number in particular, and of course that has spawned a lot of imagination in our current context and history. One of the interpretations I like of it is that it's almost whole, but not quite. 666, it's not quite 7. So it's this mockery or this attempt at being whole, or I don't know, subversion of it. This morning I read an article. It was actually more of a blog, but it was a guy writing on the topic of BS, and it was actually really good. And he was reflecting on just how much of it we encounter in the world, whether it's in advertising or in social media or in political discourse, or in my favorite was he talked about the BS of self-help, right? How if you want to be healthy, you need to wake up at 5 a.m. every morning and take an ice bath, and all of these things that are marketed at us. And he's like, really what we just need is we need access to good nutrition, shelter, and a support network. That's what we need, right? All this other stuff, whatever. Maybe it's good for you, but so anyways, one of the things that I think, I personally think that John is critiquing is the false promises of power. In terms of, in his context, it's Rome and all that represents, but how power tends to make these promises towards us of whatever it might be: security, safety, strength, satisfaction. I'm doing the alliteration thing again, not intentionally, but how it's really just kind of a lie. It's not wholeness. It's something that approximates it repeatedly. One of the other things that I was thinking about is I personally struggle to empathize with the people that John's writing to, and I'm not saying it's not a critique on them or anything. There are several reasons for that. One is the time difference, right? It's 2,000 years later. I don't really understand their world. I mean, intellectually I get it, but I don't have any emotional connection to that world. Does that make sense? Yeah, I mean, it's data to me in a lot of ways. I know that these people were experiencing persecution in one form or another in varying degrees of that. But I don't know what they were. I know intellectually a lot of what was happening to them, but I don't have an emotional connection to that. Does that track? And one of the things that I realized too, and I talked about this when we began this class, is that I'm also desensitized to it because a couple of reasons. One is because Christians throughout the entirety of our history have always tried to seize the narrative of being persecuted. We've hung on to that persecuted identity throughout our existence. Even when we're the ones doing the persecuting, we come up with a reason to justify that it's actually because we're being persecuted by. So I'm quite desensitized to it. It's like the boy who cried wolf. You know, I have a hard time emotionally identifying with it. So what I was actually thinking about this week is I was like, how do I better internally position myself so that I can understand why these words resonate for the people that John is writing to. And we know that they do resonate, right? Because this letter wouldn't exist, it wouldn't be in our canon if these weren't powerful words to somebody at some point in time. Right? They're confusing words to us now, but they were powerful words at some point in time. So for Lent, at our Bible study at Shirley's, I have been sharing poetry every week as kind of a grounding, centering conversation piece. 2 weeks ago, I did a piece by Padrago Tuma. This past week, I read some Maya Angelou, not this specific poem, a different one. Anybody here read much Maya Angelou? She's a cultural figure. So we Americans know her, right? She was the poet laureate at Bill Clinton's inauguration, which was one of the poems we read. Has anybody read that poem? I forget the title of it already. It's something to do with the morning. On the Pulse of Morning. That's the name of it. Anyways, Maya Angelou writes about a lot of stuff. She writes about being a black woman. She writes about being a black woman, claiming her sexuality and all the things that entails. She also writes a lot about the black experience. And one of the things that I think we forget in 2025 is the proximity of our current setting to, the fallout of the civil rights movement. So I had to look it up this morning because I was curious. Do you know when the last black man was lynched in the U.S.? 60s? That's what I was thinking. I was like somewhere in the 60s. 1981. Yeah, there was a man in Alabama who was lynched by the Ku Klux Klan because another black man was accused of shooting a white police officer, had not been convicted. In fact, the trial was declared a mistrial. It went on to mistrial like 3 times before he was finally convicted. But these Klan members were ticked that, if a black man can kill a white man, we should be able to kill a black man. So they picked some random dude up off the street and hung him from a tree. And then slit his throat 3 times to make sure he was dead. I know. And my point is that I have emotional connection to. That, because of its proximity, because I've learned about that, because I wasn't yet. I was born in 82. Sorry to spoil it for you. I know, but you were alive during. I'm casting a broad net here. Many of you, all of you, were alive during that time period. So it's got an emotional connection. So the reason I bring it up is I would encourage you to maybe draw a through line between the persecution that people of color have faced in our country and the voices that have come out of that, and what it was like to be a Jewish or Christian person in Rome in the first and second centuries. Because the reality is we like to think that Christians were persecuted because they're Christians, and the reality is that's not the case at all. They were persecuted because they were different. It was, in fact, for this time period, Christianity was not seen as a separate thing by the Roman Empire. It was considered to be a cult of Judaism, right? So it wasn't the unique nature of Christianity that caused the powers that be to want to oppress and kill these people. It was simply because they came from a different place, many of them, and they talked different, maybe looked different, and they believed different. Things that we're familiar with, right? So I encourage you to and again, we got to be careful about drawing one-to-one comparisons, especially with this much time difference. But, tap into that same kind of emotional reaction when we're thinking about how these people hear the words of John, especially in terms of whether they are convicting or hope-giving. Because we are reading them from a very different perspective, and a lot of them are very convicting to us. It's terrifying to hear about these cosmic powers and the end of the world, perceivably, but I would encourage you to think about how that might feel like good news to these folks. And I want to read this poem just to put us in the mood, I guess. You familiar with this one? Still I Rise. This is one of Maya Angelou's more favorite poems. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. Do you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame I rise, up from a past that's rooted in pain I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling I bear in the tide, leaving behind nights of terror and fear I rise, into a daybreak that's wondrously clear I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. And one of the things that was remarkable to me as I was reading through this week is how she claims imagery that's much bigger than herself, right? How she's talking about, number one, she's an amazing poet. I don't need to tell you all the reasons that she's a good poet. But the things that I found remarkable, especially in comparison to the words that we're reading, is one, how big the imagery is. It's, I am bigger than myself. We are bigger than the threats that we face. And, she's directing these at an imaginary you, right? And we can all kind of imagine who that might be, but just like moon and like suns, there's a reason that John claims that imagery as well too. It's the cosmic nature of it. It's the inevitability of the triumph of good over evil, and this is definitely a sentiment that I hear Maya Angelou tapping into. Right? I rise. Whether you kill me, I am. We are me. Right? It's this bigger connection. And that's what I would encourage you to think about as we read through Revelation. So, yes, ma'am. Oh yeah. And that's the power. And that's the power of her words and her person as well too. Yeah. It's not just about the identity of blackness. It's about the identity of woman, and a lot of her poetry attests to that as well. And self, yeah. So, go read Maya Angelou. There's some great stuff in there, particularly the on the breath of morning, or on the edge of morning, or whatever it is, on the pulse of the morning. That's what it is. Amazing poem for now, if that makes sense. Okay, now we get the shock of the language. And this, for me, is one of the tough things about reading Revelation is, again, in its context, and speaking of women and women's rights, again, we're kind of slapped in the face with the imagery and the language of first century ancient world, right? And how one of the things that we need to claim here is how the image, the metaphor of prostitute, in this case, the very, very blunt language of whore, is used as a metaphor for unfaithfulness, not just on a romantic level, but on a national level. In fact, that's a theme that is throughout the Old Testament especially. The prophets often use that image to describe the unfaithfulness of Israel. And again, we have, in our many studies, remarked upon the great imbalance of infidelity between genders in the ancient world. The stoning of the unfaithful woman, and how the guy is nowhere to be found, but they're ready to stone this poor woman to death because she's been unfaithful, right? It takes two to tango. But apparently her dance partner skipped town. So I just want to preface, by acknowledging that, right, that this is not just vulgar language from our perspective, but it is very much rooted in a first century mindset. That being said, John is trying to communicate things, okay? So I've said my disclaimer, and I am going to read through this, same as we did last week. I'm going to read through it. We can talk about some stuff, and we'll move on to the next chapter. My goal today is to get to chapter 19. Because I would love to spend the final 2 weeks on the good news part of Revelation, which is 19 through 22. That's the fun stuff. Okay. So, number 7, completeness, wholeness. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great whore who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and with the wine of whose fornication the inhabitants of the earth have become drunk." So he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. Sorry. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. Is this the same? This is the same beast? Maybe. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her fornication. And on her forehead was written a name, a mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of whores and of earth's abominations. And I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the witnesses to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly amazed, but the angel said to me, "Why are you so amazed? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to ascend from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will be amazed when they see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. Also they are 7 kings, of whom 5 have fallen, 1 is living, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain for only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. These are united in yielding their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. And he said to me, "The waters that you saw where the whore is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the whore. They will make her desolate and naked. They will devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by agreeing to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God will be fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth." All right, who is it? In today's game of Revelation charades or catchphrase or whatever, who is it? Who's the whore of Babylon? Roman Empire. Yeah. And again, I'll give my other disclaimer, which is that these are not necessarily symbols; they're images. Meaning, like, a symbol is like, it's like, the button that's on the side of this. There's the O for off and the straight up line for on. I don't know why, but we know what they mean instinctually. Images are conveying meaning on multiple levels. Okay. But in this case, it's really funny. This is one of the only places in Revelation where the author and/or Jesus is just like, "Let me explain this to you." I always wonder, like, I think getting the sense that the people are just overwhelmed and sick of playing charades, right? Or is it time to get it? But yeah, and let's talk about the clues that might lead us to that assumption. I mean, he comes right out and says at the end, this is the great city. What is Babylon for the Hebrew people? Yeah, captivity, destruction, yeah. Yeah. Of Jerusalem and the temple, yeah. Symbolically, sorry to use the word I just said not to use, but what does Babylon represent to the Hebrew people? The enemy, right? The enemy to the east. This is one of the things that when you're reading the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, remember this, which is that Israel, for the entirety of its existence, is sandwiched between two great empires: Egypt to the west and south, and Assyria, Babylon, Persia to the east. Right? They're always in this power sandwich. So Babylon, as John is using it, represents all these things. It represents the enemy. So for this to be the promiscuous woman of Babylon, to change our language a little bit, do you get what John is getting at here, right? And again, the image of the unfaithful woman is, like we said, an image that is used by the prophets to describe Israel when it goes astray, but also just as this idea of profanity, right? We get that. I mean, you can understand that for a culture that is really, really much, well, I shouldn't say much more, but is really obsessed with, gender relations, but specifically on making sure that women fit into their proper role as childbearing, that a woman who is unfaithful represents a breaking of that culture. You kind of track that. What else? What are the other images? I mean, do you, as this image is being given, are you picturing, like just the great excess, right? Excess of sexuality, gluttony, wealth, all these things, and might you understand how, from the perspective of John and these communities, how they might perceive Rome in a similar fashion? Does that track? Are these metaphors tracking for you guys? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, but and that is a story of history, right? That is conquest, and that well, I should say that good for bringing that up too. I mean, that's the other thing that Babylon represents, which is a very much a one-to-one with the Roman Empire, is just conquest in general, right? Sure, absolutely. Erasing people, absolutely. Verse 6, and I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the witnesses to Jesus. That's a pretty on the nose there. I mean, this is she or they who have killed the faithful, the martyrs, right? Where is it? The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet. What are purple and scarlet in the ancient world? They're the colors of royalty. Yeah, I don't need to write that down. You guys know what I'm talking about. Yeah, there's no trying to hide here, right? This is not code language. This is pretty upfront, in your face. John telling it like it is, which is why, remember when we were talking about the nature of the distribution of these letters and the nature of John's imprisonment, they probably weren't reading his mail or they didn't care, right? Because he isn't trying to hide meaning behind code language. He's telling you straight up front here, here's what these things represent, So, which is to say that we don't need to try and dig through secret code 2,000 years later to find the hidden meaning. He's not intending to hide the meaning. Hold on. 7 mountains. Where is that? Oh, thank you. 7, there we go, 7 hills. Well, there are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. There are also 7 kings, of whom 5 have fallen. Are you aware that Rome was known as the city on 7 hills? Yeah, okay. Don't need to preach to the choir there. And here is the one that people tend to have fun with, and when you hear like the dispensationalists and Jerry LaHaye, or Tim LaHaye, and the guys that wrote the Left Behind series, because they wrote that series, and after the series became successful, became theologians. Okay, let me just put that out there. My read of it is that they fully intended this to be a maybe not best-selling, but a selling novel, right? And when they not only sold a bunch of novels, but also got a lot of attention from the evangelical Baptist community, that it went to their heads. And then after they wrote the Left Behind series, they wrote a couple of books that were nonfiction, which, don't get me started on Left Behind series and fiction versus nonfiction. But why was I bringing that up? I had a good reason for it. Doesn't matter. Oh, no, conjecture about what the 7 heads represent, right? So, there's 5, one that is yet to come. I'm not going to get into the math per se, but a lot of people point to number 5 or 6 or whatever as being Nero. And one of the things about Nero is that after Nero died, there was some of his supporters were claiming that he actually came back. This is all interesting stuff. I mean, obviously Nero was fiddling while the city burned, which we talked about may or may not have been true, so you can understand the fire and destruction imagery. But what people have had fun with is trying to figure out who the 7 are, and so you will see different charts of starting with some of the early emperors. The T one, what did you say? Trajan, thank you. And walking through those names, this is this one, that head's that one. And people have tried to do that from a modern context as well too. Pat brought this up at the beginning, is who do we understand those 7 heads to be? If I were to have any form of artistic talent and were to draw the 7-headed beast up here, who would you assign those names to be? To understand how this metaphor works. Similarly, the 10 kings, I mentioned this way back at the beginning. Some have pointed to the United Nations and NATO, because at some point they each had 10 members, but that's different now, which makes me wonder if the current administration, who seems intent on withdrawing ourselves from many of these treaties, if they have people whispering in their ear who are reading Revelation in this way. I don't know. It's maybe. Maybe. And then finally, you probably have as good a guess as I do, but remember, I would draw you back to just kind of how John uses times. It's okay. In Hebrew culture, what does 3 days represent? A lot of things. 3 days is the time it takes for the soul to leave the body. So Jesus was dead for 3 full days because it means that the soul was fully departed when he was resurrected. There are 3 men who represent the image of God who appear to Abram before he becomes Abraham. God arrives as 3 men. There's some kind of what does 7 represent? Wholeness, completeness, the days of the week. What does 40 represent? A long time. A long time, 40 days in the wilderness, 40 years in the desert. So what does 1 hour represent for John? Short time, short time. And it's not we're not being tasked with figuring out the equivalency of John's metaphorical hour to what period of time it represents. This is John metaphorically saying they're going to have power for 1 hour, literally the hour of power, short time. Yes, you're jumping ahead, Paula. You're jumping ahead, but yes, Paula said, "Isn't it however long or short the amount of time you have power that you're eventually going to receive judgment?" Yes, ma'am. Give me a couple of chapters. Sure. Yeah, and this is the type of stuff that John is encouraging his audience to do. Because what he's doing, he's poking holes in the infallibility, right? And the impervious nature of the Roman Empire. That's what he's doing. Yep. Oh yeah. Okay. Anything else from here, or is it okay for me to move on to 18? Speak now. Okay. Okay. As you predicted, Paula, the fall of Babylon. After this I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his splendor. He called out with a mighty voice, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. It has become a dwelling place of demons, a haunt of every foul spirit, a haunt of every foul bird. Put a bookmark in that one. A haunt of every foul and hateful beast. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxury. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, so that you do not take part in her sins, and so that you do not share in her plagues, for her sins... Oh, what happened? What did I do? There we go. Her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Render to her as she herself has rendered, and repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double draught for her in the cup she mixed. As she glorified herself and lived luxuriously, so give her a like measure of torment and grief. Since in her heart she says, I rule as a queen, I am no widow, and I will never see grief. Therefore her plagues will come in a single day, pestilence and mourning and famine, and she will be burned with fire, for mighty is the Lord God who judges her. And the kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived in luxury will weep with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning, for they will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, Alas, alas, the great city, Babylon, the mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore, cargo of gold, silver, jewels, and pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet, all kinds of scented wood, all articles of ivory, all articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, olive oil, choice flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots. He is very exhaustive in his description. Slaves and human lives. The fruit for which your soul longed has gone from you, and all your dainties and your splendor are lost to you, never to be found again. The merchants of these wares who gained wealth from her will stand far off in fear of her torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas, the great city, clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels, and with pearls, for in 1 hour all this wealth has been laid to waste. And all shipmasters and seafarers, sailors, and all those whose trade is on the sea stood far off and cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning, What city was like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads as they wept and mourned, crying out, Alas, alas, the great city, where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth, for in 1 hour she has been laid to waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, With such violence, Babylon the great city will be thrown down and will be found no more. And the sound of harpists and minstrels and of flautists and trumpeters will be heard in you no more. An artisan of any trade will be found in you no more. And the sound of the millstone will be heard in you no more. And the light of a lamp will shine in you no more. And the voice of bridegroom and bride will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the magnates of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in you was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who have been slaughtered on earth. Whew! Pretty comprehensive. What are the details that stood out to you there? You sure? Plausible deniability. I did not say the words that you said I said. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. What ballpark, what year was Pompeii? Okay, thank you. Yeah. And do you, Cynthia had her hand up too. And do you track with the imagery? Yeah, I mean, wealth, abundance, and what the thing I find fascinating in this, is the contrasting of voices. So on one hand, you have the depiction of the corruption, but then you hear the voices of the merchants and those who live there lamenting the loss of wealth and profit and opportunity and all this stuff, you know. And that image of Babylon, aka Rome, could that critique be applied to many other places, historical and modern? Yeah, absolutely. Cynthia, what were you going to say? Yeah. Oh, no, yeah. Good thing we're in a different port on Tuesday. Yeah. Yeah, which, and again, I'll repeat myself. If you're hearing it in this and you're asking, is it valuable and or is John intending it? Yes, right? I mean, he's painting a picture here. The remarkable thing is that 2,000 years later, we can track with the picture, right? We can understand a lot of the metaphors that he's using. We can understand the sentiment that he's trying to convey of this city bloated with wealth and riches at the cost of others, right? The ways in which the city, Babylon, Rome, whatever, has exploited, right, the poor and or the world, you know, for its own purpose. That image comes through loud and clear, right, in a very descriptive way. How, you know, the thing that people lament when it's gone is the lack of wealth, you know. The merchants listing off all the things. Yeah, Paul. Yeah. 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 Amen, brother. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. We have to look no further than Jonah, right? Nineveh, the city that houses some 120,000 souls, and Jonah lamenting to God that God's not going to destroy the city, like Jonah knew he wouldn't. And God is like, Jonah, why are you angry about this bush that grew up over you and I killed, when you're not concerned about these some 120,000 persons plus animals, you know? And how, yeah, because Jonah associated Nineveh with the bastion of evil, right? Because Nineveh was the seat, it was the center of the Assyrian Empire. This is the place that is the Babylon for his day. And I hear the same thing in John as well too, because you know that there are Christians living in Rome, there are Jews living in Rome, right? It's not the city as in the geographical boundaries or the people that live there. It's the symbol, it's the representation of power and authority, which is exploitative and corrupt and bloated and all of these images. So, you know, it's an interesting thing to think about in this context. What exactly is John critiquing about Rome? Is it just a kind of like de facto critique of Rome as an entity, or is it the excesses, the power, the corruption, etc.? And again, the thing that gets repeated over and over again is how long did the kings reign? 1 hour. How long does it take to destroy it? 1 hour. Which again, don't get hung up on 60 Minutes or whatever, unless it's the news show, which was always really great. But it's the metaphorical representation of the short time period. Yeah. So taking these last two chapters kind of as a unit, or we can even include 14 through 17 as well too, because that is, as I said, the kind of like supernatural, almost fantasy-like setting. What if you were to, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. If you were to narrate what John is communicating in those chapters, the essence of it, like what's the message that John is communicating to the 7 churches? This is a task, and I may be doing the thing where I put out a fish hook and expect you to come up and bite on it and tell me exactly what I want to hear. So I apologize for that. Yeah, okay, yeah, let's write these down. Stand up for yourself. Against whom? Yeah, the powers that be. Yeah. You understand why I heard Maya Angelou speaking in this. Stand up against the powers. Fight the power. What else do we hear in here? Sure. Or don't yield your power. Don't be separated. Because it's only going to be around for an hour. What else? What do you think, Paula?
What is the doctrine, theology, what's the program that these churches are following?
Ça n'existe pas. This is early on. So this is Revelation dates sometime between 90 and 110, ballpark. Okay, that date has moved forward in time, or backwards in time, I guess, insofar as that when I was in seminary, a lot of people were trying to date Revelation as late as like 115 or something like that, but that date has crept up to where many argue it's before the end of the first century. Christianity at that point in time, again, at least from the perspective of the Roman Empire, has not become it's not a separate thing. And in terms of the cohesiveness of Christian theology, what you effectively have is you have churches or communities of people existing in a bunch of different places, of whom the only thing that ties them together is a mutual belief in Jesus, whatever that means at that point in time, and these various apostles that are networking between these churches, right? That's what Paul does, okay? So to kind of answer your question in a roundabout way, there isn't necessarily a cohesive theology. There are minor theologies, but there's no unified understanding, I would say, among. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so worship in the early Christian church is a gathering on Sunday, Bible study in the morning, meal after the Bible study. Baptism happens on Easter Vigil. There's a strong emphasis on responsibility for community, right? Because the meal it's not just a ritual, it's also a way where they feed the widow and the orphan, right, in their community. Sure, yeah, you could think about it that way. Also for a people who, whether or not we articulate them as being oppressed, who are certainly forgotten by the powers that be, which is really kind of the status quo of the marginalized. It's not so much that persecution is about consistent downward pressure so much as it is they're just left to fall through the cracks. What these people have done is they've built their own systems of social security, to use that phrase. Yeah. Wayne, yeah. Yep. That, if I were to summarize Revelation in a sentence, that would be it. Life is terrible and something is going to happen. And I'm not being snarky. I mean, That and again, this is why I'm drawing the black experience from our history in here as well too, is that's the hard thing for us to identify with on a big level. Each of us has suffered in our own right. I don't mean to diminish that. Right? We've all experienced pain and loss and grief, and that's not just people, that's jobs, that's hope, that's opportunity, that's all those things. That's the mindset that John is writing to, right? It's a mindset of there's nothing we can do against this, impervious edifice that is the Roman Empire. And John is casting an image saying, no, not only is that not true, not only is this vast empire bloated with wealth and corruption, not only is it fallible, and again, not to confuse the people with the powers, right? They're people just like you and me. But not only is it fallible, but it's not even nearly so impervious as we think it is. It was built in an hour, it's exploited people in an hour, and it's going to die in an hour, right? Is that, so yeah, life is bad, things are going to change. Yes. Yeah. 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 Absolutely. It is horrible. And again, Nero is kind of our centered figure in this. Well, it was very dissolution is what happened to Nero. Yeah. He just kind of literally fell apart. And there's the whole mom stuff and all that jazz too. But there's a Led Zeppelin song called Your Time Is Gonna Come. That's what I hear playing in the background. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to 19. 10:25. I'm going to try to finish not at 10:45 since announcements start at 10 to the hour, so I need to be over there in a reasonable time. But I always want to return to the throne image. After I heard what seemed to be the loud voice of a great multitude in heaven saying, Hallelujah! Oh, it's Lent. I wasn't supposed to do that, sorry. Salvation and glory and power to our God, for his judgments are true and just. He has judged the great whore who corrupted the earth with her fornication. He has avenged on her the blood of his servants. Once more they said, Hallelujah. The smoke goes up from her forever and ever. And the 24 elders and the 4 living creatures fell down and worshipped God, who is seated on the throne, saying, Amen, Hallelujah. And from the throne came a voice saying, Praise our God, all you his servants, and all who fear him, small and great. Then I heard what seemed to be the voice of a great multitude, like the sound of many waters, and like the sound of mighty thunder peals, crying out, Hallelujah, for the Lord our God, the Almighty, reigns. Let us rejoice and exult and give him the glory, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. To her it has been granted to be clothed with fine linen, bright and pure, for the fine linen is the righteous deeds of the saints. And the angel said this to me, Write this, Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, These are true words of God. Then I fell down at his feet to worship him, but he said to me, You must not do that. I am a fellow servant with you and your comrades who hold the testimony of Jesus. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Then I saw heaven opened, and there was a white horse. Its rider is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes are like a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems, and he has a name inscribed that no one knows but himself. He is clothed in a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies of heaven, wearing fine linen, white and pure, were following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. He will tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God the Almighty. How many are hearing music right now? And on his robe and on his thigh he has a name inscribed, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Oh, come on, Jesse. Then I saw an angel standing in the sun. With a loud voice he called to all the birds that fly in mid-heaven, Come, gather for the great supper of God, to eat the flesh of kings, the flesh of captains, the flesh of the mighty, the flesh of horses and their riders, the flesh of all, both free and slave, both small and great. Then I saw the beast and the kings of the earth with their armies gathered to make war against the rider on the horse and against his army, and the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet who had performed in its presence the signs by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast, and those who worshipped its image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur, and the rest were killed by the sword of the rider on the horse, the sword that came from his mouth, and all the birds were gorged with their flesh. Whew! Anybody J.R.R. Tolkien fans? Yeah. You like the movies? Okay, yeah. The movies are great. My beef with them is with all books that have been turned into movies. It diminishes the imagination of it for me, right? The book in which I'm thinking specifically is the Return of the King, the last book, which is a very not subtle. No, I shouldn't put it that way. J.R.R. Tolkien was stealing from the Bible a little bit, just a tiny bit, especially with Aragorn descending to the paths of the dead. Okay. Anyhow, there's that big battle at the end where the Rohirrim come riding down. Is that the end of Two Towers, or is that beginning of Return? Anyways, comes riding down the valley, and there's the Gandalf in front with the staff with bright light shining out of it and blasting through the lines of orcs and Uruk-hai and all those guys. That's what I picture. That's the image in my head. Again, I'm a nerd in that regard. One of the things I didn't remark upon because I forgot is that just the pure flat amount of not so subtle biblical quotations and callbacks in here. I forgot to mention it in chapter 18, but there's the image of the angel who casts the millstone into the sea. What's that a reference to? Do not come between these little ones and Jesus, for it would be better that you tie a millstone around your neck and cast it into the sea than to prevent one of these little ones from I'm paraphrasing, from coming to Jesus Christ. And so the angel, not so subtly, is casting the millstone, which in itself is a judgment upon the great city, because the great city has done the thing. Anyways, there are more not so subtle references in here. And again, how much of our hymnody has been pulled from Revelations? Trampling out the grapes of wrath. I hate scrolling. There it is. He will tread the winepress on the fury of the. There's a book that's named after it. Which hymn am I thinking of? The Battle Hymn of the Republic. Yeah, trampling out the grapes of wrath. So here's another one. Here's another big misappropriation and misconception. He will rule with a rod of iron. What does that mean metaphorically to you when you hear it? Like unyielding and oppressive? Does anybody else hear it that way? Okay. Psalm 23, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of the death, I will feel no evil, for your rod and your staff the rod is the thing you use to beat off the wolves, right? The staff is the thing you use to shepherd the sheep. So he rules with a rod of iron. In other words, he ain't going to let nobody touch his people. Okay? This is not about an oppressive dictatorial regime ruling with a rod of iron or rod of steel or whatever. It is the nature of the veracity, the ferociousness with which Christ protects his children. I would just call our attention to one verse and then I'll let us go here. And the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet who had performed in its presence the signs by which he deceived those. He deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped its image. So one of the kind of hanging questions here, which I would invite us to think about, is what are the consequences for those who have been deceived? In other words, yeah, okay, Andy, thank you for just putting it out there. And again, John, his Greek is weird, and he doesn't do a good job of attaching his modifiers and his pronouns to concrete things. So who is they? Who is the rest of them? Because, so there's all those who have been deceived. These two, meaning the two beasts, and the whore of Babylon, maybe, are thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns itself, and the rest were killed by the sword of the rider on the horse. So who is the rest? Is the rest all those that have been deceived, or is the rest the beast and the kings who have arrayed? And I'm leaning towards the rest is the powers of oppression, right? Whether they're concrete or metaphorical, the rest is the powers that have have killed the faithful, whose blood they have supped and drunk upon, right? And there's an intentional contrast that's happening there. Because when we started this whole story, there was that contrast of those who have been sealed with the mark of God versus those who have been sealed with the mark of the beast. And of course, our inclination as human beings is to say what that is that's good versus evil, and good wins and evil gets destroyed. But John uses that word deceived intentionally. And again, he's maybe not at this point writing to his 7 churches, asking them to have mercy upon their oppressors. I don't think he's there yet. But he's definitely leaving the door open. Does that make sense? Right? And I can say this with confidence because that is something that John does throughout Revelation. He always leaves that door open, right? We had 7 judgments. The 7th is we had 6 judgments. The 7th is withheld. It's interrupted. And time again, that final judgment is always interrupted, which again, one of the major themes of Revelation is already been spoken. It is redemption. John is not seeking to speak condemnation. He is calling both the churches and the broader population to redemption. That is what he is exhorting people. He's not telling them who's gonna get burned and who's not gonna get burned. Does that make sense? Okay, so I achieved my goal. I'm gonna pat myself in the back. We made it through 19. So next week and the week after, we're gonna look at 20 through 22. If you get a chance, I always encourage this, read ahead. Specifically, I would invite you to think about the concept of Alpha and Omega. What when Jesus says, I am the Alpha and Omega, and the concept of endings as it pertains to this. So, all right, thank you for being here today, folks. Wonderful having you. Drink more coffee. I don't know what it is about rain and this, but this is like perfect napping weather for me. I'm like,